ashamed for not having the courage to do what's right for our country. They also are a frankly disgrace to our nation, those justices. They're just being fools and lapdogs for the rhinos and the radical left Democrats. They're very unpatriotic and disloyal to our Constitution. It's my opinion that the court has been swayed by foreign interests and a political movement that is far smaller than people would ever think. I think it's an embarrassment to their families, to one another, to the two of them.
The two of them he's talking about, two of the justices he nominated who ruled against him today, Neil Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett, who might just have front row seats at Tuesday's upcoming State of the Union address. Now, my first guest has been one of the people leading the legal fight against the tariffs, Democratic Attorney General of Oregon, Neil Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett, who might just have front row seats at Tuesday's upcoming State of the Union address. Using a trade law that restricts the tariffs to 150 days unless Congress extends them. The president seems to think that today's ruling might give him even more power to levy tariffs. Do you see it that way?
I mean, this is what President Trump does, right? When he loses something, he makes up these ridiculous comments. Absolutely not. The laws on the books that the president can pass tariffs under really put important safeguards for our economy and for consumers. And you know what? If he thought he could have gotten Congress's votes to pass all these tariffs he's been doing, he would have done it. He would have done it in a way that wouldn't have been challenged in the Supreme Court. The fact is, I just don't think he had those votes. So it's going to be fun to see how he tries to sell this failed policy to the American people.
Well, didn't have the votes there, didn't have the votes in the Supreme Court. Does that mean you plan on fighting this new global tariffs order?
Yeah, here's what we got to do. We need to make sure that the president continues to follow the law, right? And obviously, he hasn't done that to date. And so we're going to be watching very closely exactly how he implements those tariffs.
Plan on fighting this new global tariffs order?
Yeah, here's what we got to do. We need to make been paid by foreign countries. So you better believe we're going to be sitting there watching this really closely, making sure that he's following the law. And when he steps out, we'll find him in court.
Well, speaking of banking, I mean, there's also a fight for refunds, something the court did not address. But many small businesses, well, they depend on it.
Without those refunds, we're really not any better off than yesterday in terms of the money that we've already outlaid. I would love to get those refunds and hire back people I had to lay off.
The president says this will go through the courts for years. So how do you get this fixed? If these rebates or refunds are on the table or not even dealt with, what's next?
Well, I mean, this is what we teach our kids. When you make it wrong, you make it right. This is a president that knew from the get-go that it was highly likely what he was doing was unconstitutional, and he was unlawfully taking money out of the pockets of Americans. He has a responsibility and an obligation to refund that money. Now, what I find incredible is when you make it wrong, you make it right. This is a president that knew from the get-go opinions. These rulings that are going against us, we want to pause those. And the reason we're okay pausing them is we're going to be willing to pay refunds, and we will pay those with interest. That's illegal filing, so I find it incredibly bizarre that he's now backtracking and, frankly, wanting to screw over Americans for money that he has unlawfully taken out of their pockets. It's wild to me.
Today's ruling is, as you know, a rare setback for the president from the conservative-led court. But this decision, it was not unanimous. There was a dissenting opinion, and in it, it said the tariffs at issue here may or may not be wise policy, but as a matter of text, history, and precedent, they are clearly lawful. Now, that, of course, is
out of their pockets. It's wild to me.
Today's ruling is, as you know, a rare setback for the president from the conservative-led court. But this decision, it was not unanimous. There was a dissenting opinion, and in it, it said the tariffs at issue to ensure it.
You know, I think the really nice thing that we have right here is you have a really solid 6-3 decision. And right now what you're seeing is the president pivot, and he's talking about using these lawful statutes to implement the tariffs, the ones that really have these important safeguards for our economy. So I want to take him at his word right now, but the moment he steps over the line and starts doing unlawful things, we'll be right back in court making sure that he is following the law. And so I think we'll see in the next week exactly how statutes to implement the tariffs, the ones that really have the
Vice President J.D. Vance not missing a beat in joining Trump's attack against the court, writing on social media, "This is lawlessness from the court, plain and simple." Well, it's neither plain nor simple, but with me now, CNN Digital commentator Van Jones and Wall Street veteran and CEO of Market Rebellion, Mark Lepresti. Glad to have both of you guys here for a plain and simple discussion on what the Supreme Court grappled with in the 46-page concurrence, plain and simple. Now let me ask you this question, because the three conservative justices, two of which President Trump, as you know, nominated, they were on the receiving end of Trump's wrath. Lawlessness was also a word that was used. What is your reaction to the president's here for a plain and simple discussion on what the Supreme Court grappled with in the 46-page concurrence, plain and simple?
A king will just assign to himself whatever authority he wants and arbitrarily wield that authority. That's why they fought a revolution to get rid of that stuff on this continent and to have a democratic republic with a powerful executive but constrained. And there was a big concern that liberals had. The Supreme Court was just going to rubber stamp and bow down and going to lose our democracy. I think it's actually a very good sign that not only do you have 6-3, it's not 5-4, 6-3, and then you have two Trump appointees. And the justice is exactly correct. Liberals had. The Supreme Court was just going to rubber stamp and bow down and going to lose our democracy. I think it's actually a very good sign that not only
Be careful what you wish for, right?
Yeah.
The old adage. Perhaps they may also think that for the credibility of the court, it's a good thing that Trump is lashing out at them, because it might suggest to people they're not in his pocket, as some have criticized the court for being. But there was a little bit further that President Trump went. He claimed without evidence that the conservative justices who ruled against his tariffs are somehow influenced by foreign entities. Why go there?
Yeah, Laura, that one was a bit of a head scratcher for me as well, to be candid. But I think we have to level set a little bit here. The use of executive power by presidents, both Democrat and Republican, have been reviewed by the Supreme Court, have been determined.
Conservative justices who ruled against his tariffs are somehow influenced by foreign entities.
Several executive orders, even under President Obama, who I know he worked for quite a while. So I think it's important for both parties that we have these several executive orders, even under President Obama, who I know he worked for, to the exercise of executive discretion with AIPA, and that they now have at least 4 other statutes, including Section 122 that the President invoked today, that is not subject to the Supreme Court review, because that discretion is explicitly granted by the statute. So the refunds aren't coming, and the tariffs aren't going anywhere. Like, let's just get that straight right now. There's no refund.
I think one thing that's really important just to add to that point, though, the audience, it was never that they believed that there was no power to impose a tariff, but you rightly point out it was about what was essentially allowed through a statute, was the vehicle the Supreme Court wanted to articulate. But the tariffs are overwhelmingly, they're not popular for people who are doing. You got 64% of Americans disapproving of them in a new poll just from a few days ago. So I do wonder if Republicans are breathing a little bit of a sigh of relief, saying, okay, well, we didn't have to be the ones to say it, but these 6 did.
Well, if you're talking from a midterm perspective, I think it would be hard to deny that there
We're
are.
always talking from a midterm
I
perspective.
had that on my bingo card today. I think there are certainly several in the Republican Party that are probably saying, phew. And of course, we've seen the president and his team pushing forward an affordability charm campaign, the charm initiative ahead of the midterms. I think that's important. Look, nobody likes tariffs. I don't even think President Trump likes tariffs. But when you are fighting against
He loves tariffs.
decades, he says a lot of
Favorite word. Favorite word.
He says a lot of things, but when you are fighting against decades of failed policy that have created trade imbalances and unfair trade practices with major trade partners like China, sometimes it's got to hurt a little bit to make things right.
Well, here's the thing. You're making a good case and a rational case.
Can we wrap there?
He wants that soundbite to move.
You're making a good case, a rational case. It's the case that the president should go before Congress next week in May and pass the legislation so we can have an actual debate to vote about it. The problem is when you overshoot the skis and assume that because you are the president and you have a concern about all this stuff, that you can run roughshod over our process, that's the problem. And he didn't have to do it. My concern, I've been baffled this whole time. He has a majority in Congress. He has an argument to make. He didn't make it. And now he has his hands smacked. And in the meantime, for a year, we've had, I think, a loss of U.S. credibility, which also ultimately can hurt the U.S. dollar and the U.S. economy.
Well, and that's quickly, is the refund issue, which some are
Give me my
asking
money.
for, I mean, the give me my money part,
Give me
is
my
that
money.
a winning issue for Democrats?
I think it is.
Because is it practical?
It don't matter if it's credible. You said Mitchell, dude. Okay, give me my money. That's what I think the Democrats should say. We will get you your money back. Trump stole your money. We'll get it back. That's what.
And if they fail in that endeavor, they lose credibility in the long run.
Hey, listen, by then we'll go on and talk about something else.
Politics, everyone.
Friday night.
Right. That was politics.
Friday night.
Dan Jones. Talk about the big flow so much. We'll talk about a David and Goliath